All Hoops Podcast.
All right, so get ready because today we are really going to dive deep into one of those stories that's basically become a legend in the world of sports.
Uh-huh.
It's the Sprewell-Carlesimo incident. Now, you probably remember all those headlines at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Just the shock.
Right.
The whole absurdity of an NBA player actually choking his coach.
It was wild.
But how much do we really know about what went down back in 1997 with the Golden State Warriors?
That's right.
Well, we've got a pretty unique perspective to share today. Former NBA player Muggsy Bogues.
Okay.
He was on that Warriors team.
Uh-huh.
And he recently was on Paul George's podcast.
Interesting.
And spilled the tea. He gave like a first-hand account of everything that led up to this infamous moment.
Okay.
And all the craziness that happened afterward.
I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah. So
I think what's so fascinating about this whole thing is it goes way beyond just like a simple act of aggression. You know, you've got this clash of personalities, a struggling team, and a very specific coaching culture in the NBA at that time.
Okay, so paint the picture for us. Who were these guys? Sprewell and Carlesimo. And what was the vibe like on that Warriors team?
Well, you've got Latrell Sprewell, obviously the all-star, a guy known for his talent on the court, but let's just say he had a bit of a rebellious streak off the court.
Yeah.
You know, think cornrows.
Yeah.
Disregard for the dress code.
Uh-huh.
A real challenge to the NBA's establishment.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have PJ Carlesimo, the new coach, coming in with a reputation for being incredibly intense, almost like a military drill sergeant in a league full of, you know, superstars.
Right.
His style was very much rooted in that old school mentality, that tough love.
Yeah.
And according to Bogues, he wasn't shy about using some colorful language to get his point across.
So already you can see how those two strong personalities might butt heads. But Bogues actually shared some pretty specific examples of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sprewell was so annoyed by Carlesimo, always criticizing his clothes, that he offered to pay his fines in advance.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Bogues recounted that Sprewell literally said, "Take the money out of my check and leave you the rest alone."
Wow.
Which really highlights how the power dynamics in the NBA worked back then. Even as a star player,
Right.
Sprewell was subject to these seemingly arbitrary rules.
Uh-huh.
And Carlesimo, whether intentionally or not, was pushing those buttons.
Mm-hmm.
So this simmering resentment is building. Were there any other warning signs before things boiled over?
Well, Bogues talked about how Carlesimo would ride Sprewell relentlessly during practice, just criticizing his effort, constantly pushing him. And this wasn't just tough coaching. It was personal. You could feel the tension rising on the court.
And then it happened. The infamous practice.
Oh, yeah.
Where Sprewell finally snaps. Carlesimo is on him about something during a shooting drill, and Sprewell just loses it.
Wow.
He drops the ball, walks over to Carlesimo, and grabs him by the neck.
Oh, my gosh.
Bogues described the scene as pure chaos. Assistant coaches and security scrambling to pull Sprewell off, players in shock. But here's what's really interesting. Some of Sprewell's teammates, while obviously stunned by what happened, later admitted to feeling a sense of, I don't want to say satisfaction, but maybe understanding. They had seen Carlesimo's abrasive style firsthand. And while they didn't condone violence, they understood the frustration that had been building up.
Yeah, I can see that.
So in those first few moments after the incident, it sounds like the team was trying to figure out how to handle this internally.
Right.
Before it became a media frenzy.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. They held a team meeting where, according to Bogues, players suggested a 10-game suspension for Sprewell, maybe some anger management counseling. They thought they could contain it, deal with it as a team. But of course, in the world of professional sports, things rarely stay behind closed doors. This is where the media's role in shaping the narrative becomes crucial.
For sure.
The news leaked. Pictures surfaced of the marks on Carlesimo's neck.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly this story explodes.
Yeah, it was everywhere.
And then comes a move that really complicates the situation. The Warriors imposed a gag order on the entire team.
What?
Yeah. They were forbidden from speaking to the media.
Wow.
From sharing their side of the story.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So you have this incredibly charged situation, a team divided, and then the organization basically silences them.
Right.
That had to have a huge impact on how the public perceived what happened.
Absolutely. Think about it without the player's perspective. The media was free to frame the narrative.
Yeah.
And they did. Sprewell was painted as the villain, the out-of-control athlete,
Huh?
while Carlesimo became the victim, the poor coach just trying to do his job.
Right.
It's a classic example of how powerful narratives can shape public perception, especially when only one side of the story is being told.
And what about the impact on Sprewell himself? I mean, being labeled as that guy who
Right.
choked his coach,
Oh, yeah.
that had to have serious consequences for his career.
Oh, without a doubt. Sprewell was suspended for the rest of the season, lost lucrative endorsement deals,
Yeah.
most notably with Converse,
Right.
and his reputation was tarnished. It's hard to overstate how damaging this incident was to his career trajectory. He went from being a rising star to a cautionary tale, and it all played out in the court of public opinion.
But it wasn't just Sprewell who faced the fallout. Bogues and several of his teammates decided they couldn't stay silent even with the gag order in place.
Wow.
They knew they had to stand up for Sprewell to offer a different perspective.
This is where things get really interesting. At Sprewell's press conference,
Yeah.
Bogues, along with Bimbo Coles,
Mhm.
Joe Smith, Felton Spencer, Robert Horry, and Dwayne Farrell stood behind him in a show of solidarity.
Wow.
They wanted to make it clear that they didn't condone Sprewell's actions,
Right.
but they understood the context, the buildup of frustration that led to that moment.
This act of defiance must have sent shockwaves through the organization.
Yeah.
You've got these players, some of them key members of the team, risking their own careers to support a teammate who had been essentially branded a pariah.
It was a bold move, and it speaks volumes about the kind of loyalty and camaraderie that existed within that team.
Right.
They were willing to challenge the dominant narrative, even if it meant facing potential repercussions from the Warriors' management. And remember, this was 1997. Social media didn't exist. Players didn't have the same platforms to voice their opinions.
Right.
Speaking out like this was a huge risk.
And the Warriors' response to this act of solidarity was, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly what you'd expect from an organization that supposedly values teamwork and loyalty.
So what happened?
What happened next is almost unbelievable. In the months following that press conference,
No way.
the Warriors started trading away the players who had stood up for Sprewell.
Really?
Muggsy Bogues and Joe Smith were shipped off to Philadelphia,
Wow.
and others were either traded or released.
So not only did these players risk their careers to support a teammate, but they were essentially punished for it. It really makes you question what the Warriors' priorities were at that time.
It paints a pretty stark picture of the power dynamics in the NBA.
Yeah.
Players, even star players, are often seen as expendable. And those who dare to challenge the authority of the coaches or management can face swift and severe consequences.
It's true.
This incident really exposed that reality. And here's the final twist in this whole saga, just 2 weeks after that press conference where the players showed their support for Sprewell. PJ Carlesimo was fired.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's almost poetic justice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Despite the organization initially backing Carlesimo and portraying him as the victim, they ultimately let him go. It just goes to show how volatile and unpredictable the world of professional sports can be, and how even those in positions of power can become casualties of these kinds of conflicts.
So this incident was a turning point for the Warriors. Sprewell was gone. Carlesimo was gone. And a good chunk of the team that had the guts to speak up was also gone. What a mess.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about the ripple effect of this one incident. I mean, it wasn't just about a player and a coach. It impacted an entire team. It shook up the organization and sparked a national conversation about power dynamics in sports.
What's interesting is that this Sprewell-Carlesimo incident, even decades later, still makes us ask some tough questions, like how much has really changed in professional sports?
Yeah. Are players still subject to these kinds of power imbalances?
Exactly. And what responsibility do organizations have to create environments where both players and coaches feel safe and respected?
You're right. It makes you wonder if something like this could even happen today. I mean, we've seen progress in terms of player empowerment and athlete advocacy, but the fundamental power structures in professional sports haven't really changed, have they? It's a complex issue, no doubt. On the one hand, you have players who are now more aware of their rights. They're more willing to speak out against injustices. But on the other hand, the stakes are higher than ever.
Right.
Contracts are worth millions. Endorsements can make or break a career, and the pressure to perform is immense. It creates a dynamic where players might still feel hesitant to challenge authority figures, even if they're being mistreated.
So what can we learn from this whole mess? It feels like it's about so much more than just one isolated incident.
The Sprewell-Carlesimo incident offers a powerful lens. to examine the deeper issues at play in professional sports. It forces us to confront the complexities of power dynamics, the influence of the media, and the often blurred lines between discipline and abuse.
I think what makes this incident so compelling even all these years later is that there are no easy answers. There's no clear-cut hero or villain. It challenges us to consider the perspectives of everyone involved, even those we might initially judge.
Exactly. It's easy to jump to conclusions based on headlines or sound bites, but this incident reminds us that there are human beings behind those narratives, people with complex emotions and motivations.
Muggsy Bogues' first-hand account is so valuable because it gives us that insider's perspective. We see Sprewell not just as a hothead, but as a talented athlete who felt disrespected and pushed to his limit. We get a glimpse into the pressure cooker environment of a struggling team. And the impact of Carlesimo's coaching style, which, while maybe common at the time, clearly wasn't working for everyone.
And importantly, we see the players who stood up for Sprewell not as troublemakers, but as individuals with a strong sense of loyalty and a willingness to risk their own careers for what they believed was right. It speaks to a level of integrity and courage that we should admire.
So could all of this have been avoided? Could this incident have been a turning point for growth, rather than a moment of destruction for that team?
It's hard to say for sure, maybe with better communication, with a greater awareness of the power dynamics at play, with more supportive and less punitive environment. Things could have played out differently. Perhaps instead of a physical altercation, there could have been a dialogue, a chance to address the underlying issues and find a more constructive way forward.
That's a powerful thought. It suggests that even in the midst of conflict, there's always a possibility for growth, for understanding, for change.
And I think that's the real takeaway here. The Sprewell-Carlesimo incident serves as a reminder that we all have a responsibility to listen to each other, to try to understand the complexities of these situations, and to create spaces where dialogue and empathy can prevail.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about. It's a reminder that even in the world of sports, where we often focus on wins and losses, there are real human stories playing out. Stories that challenge us to examine our own values and our roles in creating a more just and equitable world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.